Our first speaker, we have the privilege of having Mr. Tony Hamilton. Tony is the BC, and I'm going to read these notes so I get them right because it's proper. Tony Hamilton is the BC Ministry of the Environment's large carnivore specialist. His role has a special emphasis on conservation of grizzly bears and threatened grizzly bear populations and mitigation of human-bear conflict. Tony's played an influential role in bringing the coast grizzly bear, two-sided printing is good, science to the Sea to Sky Land Resource Management Plan in 2008 and provided input to several major projects, including the Melvin Creek Ski Area, the Callahan Olympic Facility, the Upper Lillooet IPP, and recently Tony's been involved with the draft management plan for the South Chocolin Mountains Provincial Park. Sir, it's a pleasure to have you here tonight.
Well, I'm not sure exactly how to start, but I do want to emphasize the part of my title that says brief, because we have been at this since 2004. One of my colleagues reminded me today that our first capture in the study area after beginning the project, Dr. Sue Singer and Larry Casper of the Statliam First Nation at Lillooet, we began this back then, and Sue reminded me that our first capture was a dog. So that was a bit of an embarrassing memory today, but you know, I will be up at a very high level. We will try and expedite this evening. I really appreciate your patience in getting seated this evening, and away we go. So when I talk about brief, people often say, you know, 30,000 feet. You know what? I'm going to be up in the satellite levels. So I just have to, because we've been at this a long time and it's a very complicated topic. I do have to acknowledge that I am a government employee and that I'm very appreciative of the support that I've had over the years from the Ministry of the Environment. And I don't even know what FLNRO stands for. It's been in place for several years. I think of it as the Forest Service and those other guys. But anyways, they are integral to what we do. Obviously, we are on the traditional territories of the Squamish and the Statliam First Nations. They are definitely integral to what we are up to and what we hope to accomplish, and I'm really grateful for the song, Johnny. I have dozens of colleagues and co-workers inside and outside of government, too many to mention. Many of them are here in the audience. I hope they'll speak up if I get things wrong. They can just call out. They know me well enough. We had a lot of different funding sources. I'd bore you with the logos and talk about that, but it's really important to understand that to gather this science, we had the support of dozens of people, of dozens of agencies. We had public support, we had political support, and I'm really honored and grateful to be here. Thank you especially to the Coast to Cascades people for giving me the opportunity to stand in front of you tonight. I'm really grateful for Joe Scott and Johnny Mikas as the two key contacts for that initiative. I know there's many others for the invitation tonight. I do want to recognize that one of your local bear experts is here too, so if you do have any questions about bears that are much more localized, Sylvia's here. Sylvia Dolson, one of the best web pages on the internet about bears. Sylvia is the executive director and a very successful author, thank you, of the Get Bear Smart Society. So if you're ever after any kind of key information about bear-human conflict, I'd like to recognize and appreciate Sylvia's work tonight too. Our core team consists of the left side, Dr. Clayton Apps, Dr. Bruce McClellan, Bruce's daughter, Michelle, Steve Rochette is here tonight from Flunro in Squamish, Yvonne Patterson, a master's student, and Dr. Sue Singer, representing Statliam Government Services from Lillooet. Our key core team on this work, on this science that I'm presenting tonight. Some of the technicians we've had, Bryce, Robin, Steve's son, Matt. Blackcomb Helicopters has given us repeated discounts. I'd like to mention them. Clay Wilson, Bighorn Helicopters, the best bear capture helicopter pilot in the world. Dave Weir, the best relocation fixed wing pilot if we do have to upload our collars to a fixed wing. And I always like to give credit to the Conservation Officers Service. We have been blessed with superlative officers from Squamish, from here in Whistler, and definitely over in Lillooet as well. So very briefly, a North American, Canadian, and BC context, the BC status of grizzly bears, our people. I'm going to show pictures of them in action. I was asked to emphasize some of the methodological things that we've done. I'm going to talk about places, both geographical and ecological, and then some sort of startup of the next steps that we are engaged in. We are sitting at the southern fringe of grizzly bears in British Columbia. A grizzly bear on the Squamish estuary, a grizzly bear in the upper Pitt River are the two closest to a lot of people. It's a very unique situation that we have here in Southwest BC. So on the left there, we've got current range in dark red. Yellowstone has improved since this was drawn. They are going to head for delisting the grizzly bear in Yellowstone ecosystem, hopefully in 2014. On the heels of that, in the American Rockies, and they're going to head for delisting under the U.S. Endangered Species Act. But there has been this gradual range contraction, retreat to British Columbia, and we stand at the southern fringe in British Columbia. You can think about that in a myriad of ways, whether you're partial to the explanation on the habitat side of the equation or partial to the lead side of the equation. Both together have resulted in this incredible range contraction over the years. There's Mrs. Knoll down in the lower right, taken in 1911. So folks may know Knoll Creek, not very far from here. There she is posing with her bear. If you do want more information about grizzly bears in British Columbia, you can go to our website, the State of the Environment website. It'll just take a second to load here. And you can go down onto the map anywhere in British Columbia. I'll just pick the Squamish-Lillooet unit that we're standing in tonight. You get a brief description of the population status, how the estimate was created, the density, the roads work dating back to 2003, and you can double-click on the mortality history, and you can review the mortality history for the population unit. We're trying to make all of our grizzly bear information as easily accessible as those few clicks that I've shown you tonight. When we think of grizzly bears in British Columbia, we have to go back pre-contact, of course. There was a healthy grizzly bear population in British Columbia, probably about 25,000 bears, 23,000, depends on how we model that backwards. Tremendous influence on First Nation culture and culture backwards to the bears. I'm not qualified to speak about it at all. With respect, I have learned a lot, though, from folks like Larry. We talk about that kind of history and that kind of ecological knowledge as being as important as our own Western science as we move forward. But imagine a grizzly bear in the shrublands on the Fraser Breaks. As you can see, Jinx up in the upper left-hand corner there. In and amongst sagebrush, very unique animal, and her mother, both now gone, but adapted to some of the most extremely dry habitats in British Columbia. We tracked this bear's mother past cactus. And I've spent a lot of my time on the coast. I've been to the Kutsumatine. I know how much it can rain in British Columbia. And it was an absolute marvel to think about adaptations as special as that to that incredibly unique environment. They are that kind of species to me, and I hope to explain some of that science through the passion and love I have for the animals. On the right, you're looking at a map that tries to indicate a greater potential, the darker the green, for supporting grizzly bears historically and currently. And then as we zoom into the lower left and we look at where we are in relation to places like Harrison Lake and so on, this is the Stein-Nahattalach unit you'll hear us talk about, the Garibaldi Pit, the Squamish-Lillooet. And you can see that we believe that the historic habitat potential there was quite good. The populations are much, much smaller than they were historically for a large number of different reasons. This is our current population estimate of 15,075 bears in British Columbia, probably just 15,000. We show it in terms of density, okay? So the darker the color, the higher the density. And we talk about bears per 1,000 square kilometers. So that's the index, again, up on this State of the Environment webpage. What's important about this slide is that some of the units, and I'm just going to go through really quickly the 9 units in British Columbia of 56. We don't talk about a single British Columbia population, we talk about 56 of them. We talk about the Yak, the South Selkirks, the North Cascades, the Stein-Nahattalach, Garibaldi Pit, Squamish Lillooet, South Chilcotin, and Blackwater Chilcotin as threatened units under the provincial system. We believe that the strongest management objective for those units should be recovery. That if we don't intervene in those 9 units in our lifetimes, we could be looking at blinking those units out completely. And I'll just give you some of the science associated with that. The densities are extremely low. If we review the threats to grizzly bears in British Columbia in very general language, we talk about cumulative effects. So it's the stacking up of all of the different influences we have. Either we're killing bears, or we're altering, or alienating, or there's actual direct habitat loss. So on the habitat side and the mortality side, it's this cumulative effect that we talk about. And these overlap in 3 main ways. We have conflicts, direct conflicts with bears and humans. They can increase in frequency as time goes on. We often have those events resulting in bears being killed, or relocated bears have low survivorship. Bear populations become isolated or fragmented because of human settlements, agriculture, roads, and utility corridors in major valley bottoms. And habitat can be lost or degraded by development, alienated through bears, or they can be displaced from habitat is another jargon term we use. They avoid humans, they avoid human activities, they avoid traffic, they avoid dogs. They can be pushed away from humans. And when they do get attracted to us, it often results in mortality. We started back in 2004 with that dog capture, and then 2005 we got a little bit more serious. We put in place a British Columbia technology that was developed by some of my colleagues. Dr. Bruce McClellan, Dr. Michael Proctor, Dr. John Woods pioneered the use of hair collection to survey and census for bears. So it's a made in BC technique. And we joined forces with some of those folks, and we have now 2004 to 2012 that I'm presenting tonight. We have 2013. I'm not ready to show you those results yet. They're still at the lab. The idea of baiting bears in to really smelly liquid bait. Okay, we're talking about rotten cow's blood and rotten salmon soup, juice. Okay, so you don't want to go anywhere near Rochetta in the spring because he doesn't smell so good. He actually burns his clothes once a year. Steve, where are you? And it's incredible attractant because this animal has the best nose on the planet, maybe except polar bears. I'm biased. They come into the scent. They catch hair on the barbed wire. We collect that hair, we get the DNA analysis tells us the sex, the individual. The only thing we can't get from DNA is age. So you can't analyze for age. But now with the 21 loci, in other words, we're going further and further out in the gene sequence, we're able to get parentage, and we have some marvelous parentage information coming forward about matriarchs and patriarchs in this population. But it also allows us, through these fancy statistics that I don't even understand, let alone try and convey to you tonight, we can tell you how many bears we think there are based on those samplings. So there I am. You bucket up the cow's blood from the large containers into smaller ones that we then convey either by truck or in the helicopter behind the barbed wire perimeter. The bears come in. The additional technology that's come on much more recently than when we started in 2005 is these incredible photographs. The photographs give us age. And Steve now takes the camera, uploads it into the iPad, uses the iPad to see who's been by, and he can actually go to the different barbs that he sees that the bears have passed under, and he can say, okay, well, I think this hair sample goes with the cub because I have a photograph to go with that. So that's just absolutely marvelous. The cameras work at night, of course. There's a lot of activity at night. Across the 6 years from 2004 to 2010, we had over 12,000, almost 12,500 hair samples. Obviously, there's a lot of black bears in there. There's occasional other species are captured. 16% of those samples, grizzly bears. 262 individual bears detected 695 times. And when you look at the redetection rate, that gives you an index of how well your sampling is going. So that may not be apparent why I reported that tonight, but it's useful to us in telling us that our bears are neither trap happy or trap shy, and that improves the quality of our estimates. That number, by the way, as of today, is 416 different genetic profiles. So there's been some results that have come in just recently, and we spoke about it today. So we're up to 416 different individual bears across the time period that we've been sampling. It does our best to include cubs, but no, there's an explicit removal of 0 to 1s. Yeah. I wish, I'll have to talk to Clayton about that for clarity, but I think I'm right. Anyways, cubs are hard, Laura. Yeah, cubs are hard. Anyways, this is where we're at as of 2009. We were at 260 then, and the kinds of density distributions are first presented here, but I've got another graphic that I think is a little bit better, where I actually talk about the official population estimates so that I help put this up on the website. We don't know that there's 6 bears in the North Cascades. East of the Fraser, we know there's 1. We've seen him in 2010 and again in 2012. He showed up in 2013. A hunter saw him, took a video of him by using his rifle scope and his cell phone video camera, and we're pretty sure it's the same guy. He has a unique genetic signature. This 6 is optimistic and hopeful. This could be functionally extirpated. This could be down to him, basically. Stein the Haddlatch at 22, 23, 24 animals, less than 6 females, 5 females, 4 females, maybe even 2 breeding females left. Garibaldi Pit, we know from the videos taken by several folks in the upper pit that there's probably a couple of animals, whether they're residents in the Stein the Haddlatch or not, we're not sure. We do have a collared bear that came from Squamish-Lillooet across Highway 9 into the Garibaldi Pit. You may have heard about Power. She was written up in the Vancouver Sun last year. 59 animals in the Squamish-Lillooet unit, 116 over in Toba Butte, and then all the way up to 203. But I do want to point out that even though 203 sounds like a lot of bears, there's an incredible gradient from north to south there. And so we're definitely going to partition that population estimate. There are places in the South Chilcotin that are vacant of resident adult females. It's definitely in need of recovery on the southern and eastern sides of that unit. You can see from the photograph, I forget, Steve, what's this bear's name at the top? Never call it. Ah, yes. Okay. But an old male with the ivory claws and the big male head. And the bottom one? Rock. Yeah, rock. Collared bear. So the collared bears do come into the grids. When they are detected on the grids, they statistically provide us another opportunity to check how well we are doing at catchability. Catchability is very important to these statistics. So we want those baits to be drawing all bears in, and again seeking the hopefully that they are neither trap happy nor trap shy. They don't get a reward. We don't believe we're food conditioning, by the way. It's not like giving them a nutritional reward. They'll lick and smell this stuff, they'll roll in it, but they're not getting much from it. Grizzly bear detection probability, you can see the green is the best, the darker colors are poor. Detection probability in the Garibaldi pit was extremely low, and you can see over in the North Cascades on the far side there, on the east side of the Fraser, that it's also extremely low, particularly as we come down towards the border. But hopefully, with places like Stein Park, the Nahattalach, some of our favorite rivers, as we come up farther towards Lillooet and then come across the Selchocoton and back down into the Squamish, Lillooet GBPU. We've got some strongholds. We've got some holding places where adult females are at or near saturation density, and we hope that we can use those as source areas to recover the bears from them across the piece. When we engaged, I was grateful that you acknowledged our contribution to the Sea to Sky LRMP. When we engaged, we promoted the concept of linkage. And one of the key LRMP folks is here, Al McEwen. You may know Al from his involvement in the community through the Fish and Wildlife folks, Pemberton Fish and Wildlife Association. That linkage is just up the Lillooet River from Al's property. And when we negotiated that linkage, we had a particular kind of bear in mind, a breeder, a bear that crossed human contact, moved from GBPU to GBPU, and carried the genetic legacy, a big adult male. And it just so happened, unfortunately, that this bear in the lower left was poached out of that linkage. And we've convicted and fined the individual $9,900, and that money has gone back into conservation. We just processed that check this last couple of weeks. So we didn't know for sure at the time. We didn't have the data that we have now. We hypothesized that was an important linkage for that north-south connectivity that's so important for bear populations. And it was just this kind of guy, and unfortunately he was shot. His genes still persist. We know his gene pattern. He was a bit of a patriarch, and we want to carry that kind of bear forward as well as his female counterparts into the future. If we look at genetic isolation in terms of what is the local patterning in terms of the breeding population, this is the kind of graphic that we would produce. You can see that we've got these isolated hotspots. There are some linkages between them. They are tentative linkages. We need to not only reconnect these populations, but we need to make sure that those healthy cores are viable in perpetuity. Just really briefly on the capture side, I probably got these numbers wrong. We talked at length. I prepared this on my own and then put it past the guys today. I could be out a few bears, but basically Bruce and Michelle and Clay Wilson have largely been responsible and coordinated the bears captured in the Selchocoton and the Stein Nahattalach. We've been involved periodically, and then Steve and Clayton and Bruce have captured most of the bears over on this side. So there's sort of these two sort of major telemetry studies. This is the satellite component. So we now have the technology to hang a radio collar on one of these bears that will tell us almost real time on where they are, so that we can learn about where they move, why they move there, how they're relating to human influence, and so on. Radio collaring with the DNA, with the cameras, has been an indispensable methodology. I don't pretend that I enjoy capture anymore. I did early in my career. It is a difficult thing to put an animal through, but without the radio collars, we wouldn't know a quarter of what we know today about these animals. We affix them. They have double drop away. You can drop the collar off on demand, or it will rot off their necks. And just to give you a kind of sense of what kind of movements, I picked this one deliberately because it's local. So here's Cali from June 2010 to June 2011. There's Brandywine, there's the Callahan. When we first started inputting into the Callahan process, we had folks telling us that there were no grizzly bears there. We knew otherwise. And boy, I don't think if I walked into that room with this graphic today that anybody would dare deny that we don't have grizzly bears in the Upper Callahan. Lots of strength and power from radio-collared bears. When you go out, one of the most enjoyable things to do is to go into a location that bears have been and then collect both activity profile information. So what were they doing? What was the behavior there? Was it bedding? Was it feeding? Was it marking behavior? And characterize that and take notes and make some understandings about that. But you also characterize the site, so it puts us into these incredible ecologies. And we are so blessed here in Southwest BC to have such an incredible diversity of habitat from the desert to the high mountains to the coast in such a short geographical distance. And the kinds of opportunities and diversities that those create for bears and bear foods is astonishing. So no wonder we have these wonderful possibilities of keeping these bears on these landscapes despite the proximity to so many people. And I could go on for hours about activities, but just very briefly, a 4-cub litter, you want to talk about productivity. Very seldom do grizzly bears produce 4 cubs. Up in the Selchilcotin Park on the left, marking behavior, they're telling each other something. We sort of know what they might be saying when they signal each other through marking, but we don't know exactly. Sue is standing beside a cache, one of the management bears, that very special bear that I was talking about earlier, Jewel, over in the Lillooet area, got a mule deer and cached it. And she's standing beside the vegetation that the bear has taken and buried the carcass. And we would not have the animal density, the bear density that we have without berries. It's absolutely certain to us that this one is the dark, you folks call it huckleberry or dark blackberry or blueberry, whatever. There's all sorts of different names to me. It's vaccinium, and it drives this ecosystem productivity, as well as things like the meat and the salmon, of course. Almost done. Hypothetical recovery then for grizzly bears in Southwest BC. I won't bore you with this. Joe told me, do not put text on those slides. I'll come up out of the audience. I'll choke you, he said. Anyways, basically what I'm setting you guys up for is the understanding that we need to translate this science into an active recovery program where at around 10 to 50 animals, we've got some genetic problems. We've got some influences there that are very, very difficult to overcome. As we get up to 50 and 150 bears, we start to be successful. Above 150, then chances are we're going to have accomplished recovery. And I think that successful bear management requires 4 things. Our emphasis tonight, mine anyways, has been on the biological side. We need to have that science to inform the appropriate management programs. We need the organization, the people, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so grateful to Costa Cascades. We need the First Nation stakeholder and public support. In other words, we need industry and First Nations and the public to join forces, believe in this, and try and deliver it. And obviously on the government side, we need the program and the policy side. And that's me. So thank you very much.